At the physiological level, it's often said that high blood pressure is a silent killer amongst women because most people who have it don't have any symptoms, and that silence can be deadly. I would say that in entrepreneurship, at the mental and emotional level, imposter syndrome can also lurk below the surface, stopping our professional growth in its tracks, or even worse, preventing our big business dreams from being born in the first place. Today, we're going to take a look at imposter syndrome in a new light through the lens of the model that I work within, internal family systems, or IFS. So you can start letting your courage and your desires take up more airtime inside of you rather than your fears and doubts. Welcome to Herself, an internal family systems and women's spirituality podcast, and a space for you to come home to your innate wholeness and wisdom. You're in the right place if you're devoted to showing up for not only your outer, but also your inner life with courage and compassion. And if you feel inspired to do that in the good company of other women who are also committed to cultivating greater and greater levels of inner peace and outer fulfillment. I'm your host, Sarah Avant Stover, the author of 3 books, a certified internal family systems practitioner, and a pioneering teacher of women's spirituality for the past 24 years and counting. Here, we explore all different facets of a woman's spiritual and healing journey, both the pretty and the not so pretty parts. And we do this through wisdom talks, practical guidance for navigating the ups and downs of our paths with more grace and gusto, and conversations with other inspiring wayfinders. Above all, if you're here, you know that your continued deepening also serves the healing of our world. I'm happy you're here. Let's dive in. I often think back to that time in my life. I was in my late 20s, living in northern Thailand, where I lived for 9 years in my 20s. And I was dating a man who was 16 years older than me, so he was in his early 40s at that time. And with that age difference, he was much more established in his career than I was. I was just starting out, and he was very seasoned in his path. He was very well known. He taught and traveled around the world. And with that, he had a lot of stability, financial stability included. I was teaching a lot of yoga in town. It was in Chiang Mai. And it was at a time when yoga was really starting to boom in Southeast Asia. And I was there at the right time, and I became one of the most popular teachers in town. I had full classes, packed classes. I was making good money for teaching yoga classes and for being in Thailand, because the cost of living in Thailand is a lot lower than it is here in the States. And I experienced enough success that I started teaching workshops and women's retreats as well. And I often traveled with my partner to co-teach with him in various places around the world. And I think that he saw potential in me. He saw that I was a good teacher. He saw that something lit up in me when I was teaching, when I was in front of people. And I think he also had a desire for me to be on firmer ground financially, not just teaching these yoga classes, but to have more substantial income and savings so that we could be more on an equal level there, at least closer to that than we were. And he suggested that we create and teach a 200-hour Yoga Alliance teacher training, and that would be the first one available in Thailand. And when he first suggested that, the thought of it felt 2 things, which is these 2 things usually go together. It felt really scary, and it felt really exciting. It also felt like a big project and a big opportunity. And I said yes. As we moved forward with creating this program, he was right. It brought in more money than I'd ever made before. And again, in Thailand, that money goes a long way. And the program was a huge success. It also helped to bring my career to a new level and my confidence in myself as a teacher, as a retreat and workshop leader to a new level. But pulling this off, it was a 30-day training, wasn't without its stress, which I won't go into great detail about here today, aside from the piece that has to do specifically with our topic at hand today, which is imposter syndrome. As I was co-leading this training with my partner at the time, it was also very apparent that I was one of the youngest people there. Even though I had a very deep practice, and at that time I was very enthusiastic, you could say even fanatic, like a fanatic about my practice. I would wake up at 4 a.m. and meditate for an hour. I'd do an intensive vinyasa practice for 2 hours. I'd been trained really well in yoga. I was certified. I really knew my stuff. But it was still intimidating to have some of the students be twice my age or even more than that. And sometimes I felt like I needed to prove myself so that I could be respected, so I could be liked as much as my partner was. And I often dreamt of the day when I would be older and more established, more trusted and respected. Now, of course, I am older. I'm 20 years older. But looking back, I do have a lot of respect for that young woman and just what she was facing in terms of the doubts in herself. And I also acknowledge her for her courage, for the wisdom and dedication that she did have, and for the ways that she struggled to really feel like she could stand on her own 2 feet in her career. And that training was a very important stepping stone for me. All these years later, I continue to work with women who feel similarly and who struggle with imposter syndrome in their own ways. Now, first, I want to define imposter syndrome. It's the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. I have seen that imposter syndrome is really rampant amongst women. And I think that there's a couple of levels going on here. There's the collective level and there's the personal level. And of course, the collective filters down and impacts the personal. But what I've noticed when people are talking about healing imposter syndrome is they're really just looking at the personal level. And I think that this creates a sense of more self-blame or deficiency for us as women. But rather, I think it's more important that we really zoom out and look at the water that we're swimming in and that we have been swimming in for many centuries, where we as women have not been valued. We've not been taken seriously. We've been diminished and minimized and told very actively that we're not smart enough, that we're not capable, that we're not good enough. And when this happens over enough generations, it becomes our own wiring. And we have these deep thoughts and beliefs and we carry them around, but we think that they're ours, but they're not ours. They are ancestral, and more than that, they're cultural. And so what happens is we have women who have graduate degrees, who have taken many, many courses and coaching programs, who have a lot of years of experience under their belts, and they still feel like they're not good enough, or they don't deserve success, or they're not capable of success. And sometimes they even think that they're a fraud and that they don't know enough to be able to offer what they're offering. We can have these beliefs that we need to be perfect, we need to have everything sorted and figured out before we can support others. So I feel saddened when I hear about these hidden inner beliefs, and I also really, really get it. And I have been looking for a way over these years to really get under the hood of these really pernicious lies that we're telling ourselves as women and that we have been told culturally for a long time. And the most powerful framework that I've discovered is one that I used myself to heal these inner voices of self-sabotage and inner criticism and doubt. And it's called internal family systems, or IFS. And it helped me so much, in fact, that I went on to become certified in this evidence-based psychotherapeutic model. And it's what I integrate into my work to support other women to clear and heal these wounds and these blocks within themselves too, so that we can then really step into the truth of who we are and share that in the world in an unfettered way. Now, through the lens of internal family systems, we'd say that we are all made up of a multitude of parts rather than being one mono self. And this is a pretty widely accepted concept now, that we are a multiplicity. And we've all had the experience of, a part of me wants to eat pizza for dinner, and a part of me thinks I should eat salad, where we have these kind of conflicting agendas or voices inside of us. So that's a very mundane example, but it can be much more extreme in the sense of a part of us really wants to be successful, but a part of us is then actively preventing that success. And in the case of imposter syndrome, we have parts that are telling us that we're not worthy of success, or we need to do more or better before we can be successful. It's kind of continuing to move the carrot for us. And another thing that IFS tells us is that even though we have parts that can have a negative impact on us, at their root, all of these parts are inherently good. All of these parts are inherently good. And IFS also says that within us, these parts are members of our inner family, and they organize in little clusters. And so we could say that imposter syndrome is really held by a cluster of parts of your inner family. And these parts are various forms of your inner critics. And yes, that's inner critics, plural, because we don't just have one critic, we usually have many. And some examples are your perfectionist, your inner controller, your taskmaster. And again, they're telling you that no matter how much education you have or work you do, you're not good enough. And they think that you need to work harder in order to be taken seriously. So these parts can also lead to burnout, or just feeling like you're just constantly on this hamster wheel of doing, but not getting the results you want, and not really feeling good about yourself or in balance or aligned with your core values. So when we apply this IFS framework, we want to zoom in to look at these individual parts within us, but we also want to zoom out. And when we zoom out, it's similar to me looking back at that 20-something-year-old me in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and seeing her essence, seeing how she was so whole and worthy and complete at that time, even though she doubted herself, even though, of course, she was going to learn so much more in the years to come. And I've grown so much in these past 20 years. Even still, she was incredible then. And this big picture view we can apply to each of us. And we see that these messages of not good enough, need to do more, need to do better, are not coming from the essence of you. They're coming from these particular critical parts of you. And if we think of your essence like the sun, these critical parts are like the clouds, and the sun is always present. Your essence is always present. It cannot go away, it cannot be destroyed. But these parts, like clouds, have eclipsed the sun of your essence. They've taken center stage. They've grabbed the mic. So let's talk a little bit more about your essence first. I know that you've really rested in and as your essence before, and maybe it's been while you've been on a retreat, or while you're feeling really relaxed in a beautiful place in nature, or in the throes of doing the work that most lights you up and is the reason why you're doing what you're doing. And In those moments or in those stretches of time, you feel competent, enlivened, present, and those critical voices inside are quiet and dialed down. Then there are other times when you are experiencing the exact opposite, where your essence feels so distant that you think maybe it's gone forever. And then you start believing that you are those critical voices in your head. They've gotten so loud, they've taken over so strongly that you have a mistaken identity and you think that that's who you are. Now, I want to validate that experiencing both of these extremes, plus everything in between, is normal. Remember that we're spiritual beings here having a human experience, and sometimes we're more connected with our divinity, and other times we're more connected with our humanity. And add to that the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, and it's no wonder that critical parts of you can be taking up more space inside than you like, than feels comfortable, than is allowing you to really realize your dreams. Because entrepreneurship is scary. It is edgy and vulnerable to put yourself and your work out there, to be visible, to market yourself in your work, to go through different iterations and experiment with things that work and that don't work, to ask people to invest in you and your services, and to keep showing up despite feelings of doubt and uncertainty, not to mention any external criticism, conflict, or backlash that comes your way. It is a lot to handle. And we can also see that if these critical inner voices win out enough of the time, they're going to win. And they're going to stop you in your tracks. This is what we call self-sabotage. And if that happens enough, they're going to just cause you to throw in the towel altogether. Or they're going to keep you from raising your prices so that you can start earning money without burning yourself out, or earning more money. They're going to keep you from posting on social media and building the connections you need to grow a community around your work. They're going to stop you from launching that program or podcast or writing that book that you feel really excited about. Or from sticking with something long enough through the peaks and valleys for it to actually gain traction, because that takes time and perseverance. So if all that is true, then also isn't it true that the outer success that you desire really isn't possible without tending to these inner conflicts? And when we tend to these inner conflicts, then we experience inner success. We experience inner alignment, inner harmony. And this inner success is not having those parts, those inner naysayers, stand in your way and be actively blocking or slowing down your forward momentum. And inner success is not only having those parts not stand in your way anymore, but it's actually befriending them and then transforming them so they can become powerful allies, supporting you in taking risks. So now they're not only not actively preventing you, but they're actively urging you forward. Now, the only reason why I can say this is because I experience it now within myself. And I have to say, it makes things a lot easier. It doesn't mean that entrepreneurship is easy now. No, it's like entrepreneurship is hard, it is scary, and it also has tremendous rewards. And it gets so much easier when we get our inner parts aligned. Because otherwise, let's be honest, until that happens, you're experiencing some form of an inner civil war. And some parts of you are actively blocking your success, while other parts of you are actively seeking it by taking online programs, by listening to this podcast, by building a website, etc. So the IFS model that I've used to heal these parts of myself and that I share with the women I mentor so they can experience the same has a very elegant and accessible roadmap to help you transform these harsh voices in your head that are holding you back so they can get on board with supporting you in becoming the woman you were born to be, not only in business, but also in your entire life. And again, this work that you're doing is not just for you. Like, of course, it starts with you. It starts with the personal. But the more of us that do this work at the personal level, the more that we can shift this pattern at the cultural level that we've been entrenched in, that we've been buried under for centuries, so that we can really shed this shell of doubt, of not enough, and experience who we truly are, which as women, we know we're amazing, we're brilliant, we're incredible. And I want to share this map with you so that you can experience this kind of freedom, this really life-changing freedom too. And I'm going to be sharing this map in depth in a 4-day immersion that starts on October 17th. It's called the Inner Critic Cure, and it helps you to heal the parts of yourself that make up your imposter syndrome, and helps to heal these critical parts that hold you back and heal them at their root, so you can really resolve this and not just pile on strategies that don't really work, or that sometimes even make them worse, because trying to silence your inner critic or quiet your inner critic just makes this all worse. It's just like adding gasoline to a fire. And so in the Inner Critic Cure, we'll meet for a series of several days. And within those days, we'll have 4 live classes, as well as an opening and a closing circle, so that we can really, really sink in as a community to give this process the space and the care that it needs and that it deserves. And you will be going through this immersion with a community of other brilliant, committed women just like you. I'll be sharing daily practices that have been just pivotal for me to help you integrate everything that you're learning at each step of the way. Now, I taught this immersion for the first time last spring, and it was powerful. And this time I'm building on it and taking it to a whole new level. And if you aren't able to join us live for any of the classes, as always, replays will be available. Again, we start on October 17th. And I urge you to not let another month or especially another year go by without really giving yourself the gift of healing the parts of you that make up your imposter syndrome. This is not who you are. And it doesn't have to be this way. You can step out of this headwind that's keeping you from embodying your full potential. I live without this headwind. Many of the women I support do as well. And if this is something that you are struggling with, I want you to experience this too. You deserve to experience this too. So if you'd like to join me in the Inner Critic Cure, I'll lay this all out for you, just the start to finish map to overcoming your imposter syndrome for good. To learn more and join us, you can head to programs-sarahavonstover.com/immersion. That's programs-sarahavonstover.com/immersion, or you can find that link in this episode's show notes. So above all, these voices of imposter syndrome and inner criticism are trying in an outdated way to protect you. There is nothing wrong with you for experiencing this. And likely these aren't even yours. These are things that you've inherited from centuries and centuries of oppression of women. But you are a grown woman now, and we are living in a world that is rapidly changing, and you don't need this protection anymore, and you don't need these outdated beliefs anymore. You have gifts and talents to share. So we want to update these protective parts of you so they can step aside and they can help you soar. Or at the very least, they can help you take that next small step, which, as we all know, is what the entrepreneurial journey is made up of. It's what the life journey is made up of. Because it's time, and life is short, and success is possible for you as long as you keep taking steady, sometimes messy, but always consistent action forward, because your dreams really do matter, and it is possible for you to realize them. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the Herself podcast. And thank you for taking the time to turn in and tend to yourself. This is a lifelong journey, and every little step we take matters. Along the way, I'm right here walking beside you, sharing my own twists and turns and what I learned from them as we go. If you enjoyed what you heard today, I invite you to go deeper with me by enrolling in my free course, 7 Habits of Whole Women. Just head over to sarahyvonnestover.com, click on the link in the top right corner of the page, and the first day of this free 7-day mini course will be sent to you right away. Inside, you'll discover simple things you can do to experience your wholeness more often, starting right now. And if you haven't already, I invite you to hit subscribe on this podcast so you don't miss future episodes. If you enjoyed your time here, I'd also be very grateful if you could take a moment to rate and review this podcast. That way, other women who might enjoy this can better find it too. Above all, keep going. I believe in you. And until next time, I'm sending you my heartfelt support.